Howdy folks, welcome to Bullish on Farming. Today's June 17th, just doing an evening check, beautiful calm evening. We're in a field where we're tracking back for water. In the previous video I mentioned it's just past that tree line, halfway through the field past it. I've got the stock tub right where the wire cuts the field in half and the cows are tracking back for water. The way we've treated this field is I've been opening up 30 to 40 yard sections, and I don't know how wide this field is, but 30 to 40 sections this way every 18 hours. And that keeps a fresh paddock or a fresh section that the cows can prioritize every 18 hours. And for instance, you know, they're up here at the far end of the field, which is what I had opened up this afternoon. But you can't guarantee that they're not going to be grazing the grass that they had previously grazed, especially when they're trekking back for water. And with this high heat, right now we have a heat warning, humidity's high. We're like in the mid 30s. The cows will spend a lot of time by the shade, and then they'll kind of venture out to graze, and then they'll retreat back to the shade. And then, you know, they're not going to be too stoked to come all the way out here if they're really just hunkering down, going for a bite, going for a drink, and wanting to stay cool. So by opening a new fresh section, you know, it does encourage them to adventure because they always like that fresher bite. But it also keeps me ahead of the curve so that we're not really hammering down the previous sections. And we can start to take a walk back. I mean, the grass is very lush. And this field isn't the strongest. You know, as I walk down to the middle section here, the growth isn't as high. I'd say that the density of feed is decent. It's not terrible. There aren't really any sections with bare soil. But like, for instance, this section over here is only about 6 inches high. And yeah, the cattle have grazed a bit, but you know, it's very low here. While you get over to that 1/3 and it's very lush. And this back end and the edges of this field tend to be very lush. But this is how we're treating only this field, you know. Every other field I have water running through and touching those pastures, so we have more control. And so the tub moves with the group, and there's no back trekking that would allow them to graze. I mean, there's some areas on the farm, but most of it we have control. And so, you know, a section like this over here, it could get hammered down pretty quick. But by working with larger spaces and, you know, tracking back to the water, as long as you're opening up a new section every 12 to 18 hours on your first lap, when you're broadcasting your cows and trying to cover larger areas, I find that there is some forgiveness there. You see, the growth is starting to get a bit higher over here. And this would have been probably 2 days ago that I opened it up. This is a bare section right here, but that's very uncommon to find. And so, you know, the fields on this farm are quite blessed. You can see the low growth over here, nothing to brag about. But by grazing it light and, you know, getting, who knows what it's going to be, but let's just call it 60 days of rest before we're back here. I trust that, you know, this pasture is going to be ready, and we're probably going to high density graze this pasture because of the lower growth and the fact that we want to increase fertility and really concentrate the manure impact while also getting a lot of vegetative cover via trampling, so that the manure and the vegetation can make a beautiful formula for fertility and help with the growth for the next pass. So over here, even by the tree line, which is where they spent a lot of their time today, you can see, You know, for the cows being in here for probably 5 days, this is not hammered down, and it is not trampled, so much so that we've done something close to a total graze. You can see that this field is quite big, and running 20 mature cows, 6 yearlings, 7 calves, you know, we don't have the largest group. So a field like this, which is, I don't know, 20, somewhere between 15 and 20 acres, with what we're doing right now, it's working well. You know, if we had double the size of the group, we'd have to be moving much quicker, and my sections would have to be bigger. But that's the whole thing about adaptive grazing. So probably 5 days ago, we were in this section first. And you can see grass is looking great. I mean, we still got 12 inches, 10 to 12 inches across the board. And this was the very first paddock. Well, that's not true. The very first paddock was the other side of the water tub. And when I had moved them over to this side, backtracking, they never were able to graze over there. But that first half that I did was smaller. I mean, you can look, we've gotten some decent trampling. Right now, I'd say it was kind of taken 35% from the field, done a 35% trample, and there's probably another 30% standing. But that's after 5 days of tracking back and doing more of a progressional graze that doesn't keep as much control. So I'm not complaining. This is our tub, and that's the first section that we were in for a day and a half or so. So tomorrow I'm going to be moving them into that field over there, and I think we're going to start doing a high density graze where we're going to get, you know, a lot of impact and trampling. And because that field stands stronger, we might as well walk over to it. It's very thick. It's up to my elbow. It was disked last year just to experiment with. It wasn't me, there was an old guy on the property, and a bunch of clover come out, and the growth seems to be one of the strongest among all the fields. And you can see, folks, this is what I'm talking about. Cows have been in this paddock for 5 days. But like I say, we've been progressionally opening up sections every 12 to 18 hours. More so around 18. And they've been 30 to 40 yard by probably the width of this field. I'll just ballpark and call that about 120 yards. So with the size of the group that I had mentioned previously, that's what we're using here. But you can see this field, you know, a lot of maturity, a lot of summer warm season grasses coming up, a lot of clover. It's very thick. It's a smaller field. It's probably only an acre. And because it's only an acre, I'm willing to do a total graze. And by that, I don't mean put them in this whole acre and let them graze until they're done. I mean section it high density, really tight, get a trample, get as much feed as we can out of a short window. And like you can see, all this clover's up to my knee. And then do that as many times as we need to do a thorough graze on this field. And then moving to the next field, we'll see if we keep up with the high density. But we're about 80% through the farm, maybe a bit more. So as we get closer to that second lap, I'm planning on tightening up the paddocks, getting more trampling, so that everything we do on our second lap makes way for the warm season grasses coming in to grow out, and then pick and choose which fields we want to strategically graze in that fashion before August to stockpile for the fall winter grazing. And you can see how tall this is. This is up to my shoulder here. Well, the cool seasons that have gone ahead. I mean, some of the warm seasons are up to my waist. And so this is a very strong field. And like I say, since it's only an acre, we're gonna do a high density graze on it. And then potentially keep up with that high density grazing to move through our second lap, aiming for 70 days plus rest, so that when we return on our third lap, we've made way for a lot of the warm seasons. And then some of the cool seasons will have started to come up by the time we get to them on our third lap, and then lightly graze or graze however we feel appropriate to bring those warm seasons down, and then, you know, make way for those cool seasons. And so it's difficult to say, because a lot of times I'll think a certain way, and then just by paying attention every day to what the pastures are doing and how the cows are performing, I may very well change my mind on what I'm doing. And I guess that's why they call it adaptive grazing, because, you know, you can say you're going to do something, but I find that I do different things every year. Sometimes we get a very strong rain that come in July, and that allows me to do something that I wouldn't if the weather looked like it was staying very, very dry through July, August. And so, you know, you definitely want to be changing your style, and some people just stick with one. They just high density graze through the whole season. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. You need a certain cow to acre ratio, and a lot of the times they're only around 2 acres per cow, and that's why they're really sticking with the high density. It gives you a lot of benefit with the fertilization, but the problem is, you know, you can run into not having fresh grass to feed your animals if you don't have enough acres. So, you know, we always like to have grass in our pastures. So I do never really need to high density graze until I really want to make a change in the pastures. And by our second lap, when you see a lot of those cool seasons that are brown, standing, not a lot of nutrition in them, and we need to buy time for regrowth, rest, recovery, perfect time to high density graze. But in the springtime, when things are growing quickly, munching all the good stuff and not hammering the plants down and moving on has always served us well, to have very lush pastures to feed our cattle on the second lap. So we're going to keep up with that, and like I say, we're almost at our second lap, so we're going to be tightening up soon, and excited to just work with the season. It's been a great one so far. I'd like to say thanks for stopping by, and God bless you all. I'll see you on the next one.